But let me just check if we have enough participants to kickstart the meeting. Just a few seconds. All right, so I think we are good to go for the meeting this evening. Once again, good evening to the convener, a special guest, and everyone present this evening. You are welcome to our November edition of the monthly webinar stroke question and answer section by Lucid Point Africa. Lucid Point Africa is a mental health promotion and drug abuse awareness community that is powered by ICED. So for those of us who are not familiar with ICED, ICED means Initiative to Combat Effects of Drug Abuse. And interestingly, ICED is a non-profit organization that is committed to promoting awareness on problems of drug abuse and providing psychosocial support network to promote overall mental well-being. The goal of ICED is that by increasing education on drug abuse and mental health, teaching coping skills, and creating supportive network, we will be able to reduce the global burden of substance and mental disorders. So with that brief introduction, for those who are not familiar with ICED Lucid Point Africa, we will be going into the meeting proper. And we'll be having the opening remarks by the convener of ICED. Is no other person but Dr. Ayodeji Erubu. He's a consultant psychiatrist at the Afe Babalola Multi-Specialist Hospital. He is a young mental health advocate who is so passionate about mental health. You wouldn't believe this is true, because if he's not this passionate, he wouldn't be driving this great program. And so, with our virtual applause, I want to welcome the convener, Dr. Ayodeji Erubu, for the opening remark, the young brain and risk-taking. Just to remind us that we are at the November edition of this webinar with a focus on why are young people more likely to make risky decisions. And I want to assure you, if you are in, you are going to have a very, very interesting conversations with our experienced professional. I hand the mic over to our convener for the opening remark. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, our super moderator, Dr. Ade. I really appreciate this. Good evening, everyone. To our guest speakers, good evening. I want to appreciate the presence of everybody. While I was watching the call, I realized that we have quite a number of people dropping in, and I cited my own teacher in the house to Professor Isababa. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a privilege for you to join us and also share from your wealth of knowledge and experience this evening. I want to appreciate friends, colleagues, senior colleagues in the house, and people outside, because this program is actually meant for everybody. There is no limitation to the power of mental health education. So this evening, I cannot, welcome us enough. I really want to appreciate everybody. The volunteers too that are around today. Thank you for coming around. This is the time to talk about it. We have so many things we can talk about in mental health education. And the purpose of today's meeting is so that we can take this health education to another level through Lucid Point Africa. We'll be discussing about why young people take, risks than other people. Relatively, risk-taking is more like a conventional thing, but we realize that in young people, they tend more to, they tend to take more negative, risky behaviors and decisions when compared to, well, generally older people. So today we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the brain of the young child, adolescent, and why is it that they are prone to risk-taking. We'll also talk about the influence of social media in some of these risky decisions that we take as young people, and we'll also have the opportunity to talk about identity development and in as it affects decision making. It's a privilege to have everybody here. Dr. Abigunde Gyanaswari Colley, a very, very good friend. She's a renowned clinical psychologist in Mauritius, and she's here to calmly tell us and teach us, why identity development is really crucial. Once again, I want to welcome everybody. Without much ado, I will just go straight to the brain of the young child and why it seems when somebody is young, they tend to take risky decisions or more risky decisions with negative consequences compared to when they get older. Generally, if we internalize this, we would realize that when we are teenagers, when we were teenagers, we took more risky decisions. We took bold steps that we didn't think about the consequences, whether positive or negative. As we grew older, the extent to which we were taking those decisions reduced, and we tend to analyze things, steps before we take decisions. We tend to add 1+1 and get result before we make decisions. These are processes in our developmental milestones that all have scientific basis. In fact, there is neurobiological basis to some of these, the decisions that we take or the disparity we have in the way we make decisions as we grow old. In the field of psychology, it is said that, when we have to compare emotional maturity to social maturity and cognitive maturity, the emotional maturity actually develops faster or earlier in life compared to our cognitive maturity. In fact, it is said that we are not fully developed in terms of our cognition until we are in our early adulthood, maybe 25 years and above. And these all have basis. We can see it in our day-to-day living, and this is what we're going to be talking about today. For the sake of the people, for the sake of our participants that are hoping to learn about this, I would start by describing the brain. The brain has many structures, just like the brain box in our vehicles and any other machine. It controls almost every other thing we do. The way I'm talking, the way I'm looking, the way I'm gesticulating, the way I'm moving my hands, decisions I make, my thinking faculty, my sensation, every single thing, we can talk about it. The brain controls it. Different structures in the brain that control it. So I'm going to limit this part of the brain to what concerns us today, which is the emotion and reward, and also critical analysis. So the two parts that I'll be talking about is the part we call the limbic system, which is located deeper in the brain. It has structures like what we call the nucleus accumbens and many other important structures that play a role in our reward system. When I say reward, I mean the process in which we get satisfied, we get gratified when something happens to us or when we make a decision, maybe based on the outcome or the results. It makes us feel good and makes us or predisposes us to repeating the behavior. That is what I mean by the reward. And the other part that I'll be talking about is the prefrontal cortex. That is the foremost part of the brain. When you look at an adult or a child, when you compare the brain, well, it may not be feasible. It may not be quite obvious when you just check in, grossly. But when you compare the brain of a child and an adult, they are different because the level to which the frontal lobe, which is the frontal part of the brain, the level to which it has developed is different compared to that of a child. So the foremost part or the frontalmost part is the part we call the prefrontal cortex. And at the prefrontal cortex, there are many, many functions. Functions like executive functioning, planning, critical thinking, ambition, that part that controls us whenever, that controls excessive emotional reaction. That part that makes us not to carry out socially inappropriate behavior outside. that part that tells us that no, this thing is not acceptable. No, this thing is excessive. No, this thing is disgraceful. No, this thing is embarrassing. That part is, the prefrontal cortex. In fact, it's also the seat of our personality. And that is why, we don't fully develop our personality until we are adults, meaning that that part of the brain is not actually fully developed until we become adults. So this explains, or we are getting to where I'm going anyway. So these two parts now, we can see that one part is for deep analysis, inhibition, control, regulation. Another part is just for reward. It doesn't care about the inhibition. That other part that lies deep inside, that I called the limbic system, its own function is anything emotional, anything rewarding, anything gratifying. I take a chilled Coke, I feel good. That feeling is from that part. I just add a bottle of alcohol and I feel on top of the world. That part is from, that feeling is from that part. And that is why we would actually talk about substance use as part of those risky behaviors. So this behavior become risky when it becomes a perpetual pattern for an individual. You keep utilizing that part of the brain without regulation. And we'll not be able to blame the adolescent for this, because the part that is meant to regulate, which is the prefrontal cortex that I spoke about, is not even well developed. So the part that is very, very sensitive, that is very active, is that part of the midbrain, of the that called the limbic system, which has some structures that enable our reward. That is the part that is very active. And that's why it seems a child or an adolescent is always making decisions that only care about their emotion, decisions that only care about what would they gain, decisions that would only care about the good feeling. Is it smoking? Is it drinking? Is it betting? Is it gambling? All those decisions that only deal with, good feeling, good feeling. These are decisions that we term as risky decisions with negative consequences. There are ways that as trainers, as professionals, as guardians, as people that are elderly can handle that by leveraging on those risky decisions, because it shows that they are bold. It shows that they are not afraid. The older you grow, you become more afraid, right? Because the other part is more active now, more developed. So there is a balance. In case you're making too excessive decisions that are reward focused, the other part is there to regulate, is there to control. So for an adult, you're able to know between right and wrong. You're able to balance decisions. You're able to weigh consequences before you take action. That takes time though. So that is the way it is. However, as a child or an adolescent or a young adult that has that limbic system very active, does it mean that it is a bad thing? No, not entirely that. It means that as adults, as guidance, we can also leverage on that and make them take decisions that are very bold, though, very quick, though, but have positive consequences. Like, organizing adaptive activities that are very healthy, social clubs, you know, making them very active at that age. That is one way in which we can actually leverage on that, that bold decision making ability that they have at that stage. So briefly about reward, because I started by talking about why their reward system is very sensitive. I would give examples. I will just use some analysis here. When we take psychoactive substances, there is a neurotransmitter in the brain that elevates within a very short period of time. It is called dopamine. People call it pleasure hormone. We have some other pleasure hormones, but this dopamine is very critical when we talk about the reward system for children and your young adults, and it is very active at this stage. Decisions that are risky give them surge in their dopamine level. For example, you take alcohol, few minutes to less than an hour after taking alcohol, you get up to 200 units surge, rapid surge in the level of the dopamine. If you take cocaine, you get up to 400 units rapid surge in level of dopamine. This is showing that dopamine level is very high compared to when you even eat. When you eat food, you get about 150 or thereabout units of dopamine surge, after eating food. This shows that, these are activities that are well rewarded in the brain. And because of that, the high surge of dopamine, you tend to make that behavior again, you tend to repeat that behavior again. So what we should focus on is to try and separate what are the things. Yes, these things cause surge in dopamine level. The consequences of this, habit, is it good or bad? We should encourage the ones that are good and discourage the ones that are bad. Eating good food is good. It's, increases dopamine level. That's beautiful. But what about psychoactive substances? The surge in dopamine is not helpful because there is good reward, yes, in the brain. The person repeats the habit. From experimental use, it becomes a regular use. From regular use, becomes dependent user, and eventually addiction sets in, and all the other psychosocial complications of addiction becomes the big deal. And that is why we are saying, yes, we need to separate those that have bad consequences, which we call the negative, risky decisions, to those that have good consequences, the positive, risky decisions. There is the other thing that I feel I should just talk about briefly before I return the mic to the moderator, which is the reinforcement. And I think we should have an idea of what reinforcement is all about, because many of these decisions that they make are actually well reinforced in their brains. If they are not well reinforced, they will not repeat the behavior. And what do I mean by reinforced? Either the behavior or the habit adds something to them that makes them feel good and make them or makes them want to repeat such behavior. We call that positive reinforcement. Or that habit removes something bad in them and makes them feel good and makes them want to repeat the behavior. We call that negative reinforcement. So in young adults, their brain is very sensitive to things that are very rewarding, and positive and negative reinforcement play a very, very good, a very, very critical role in this. In summary, I would want to say that it doesn't mean that the teenage period is a bad period. It doesn't mean that the teenage period should be, synonymous to juvenile delinquencies or bad habits. It simply means that adults, parents, guardians, teachers, professionals should understand why young people do what they do. They should understand that it is biological. It is because the brain at that stage is at the stage of development where that part of their brain that favors reward is more active and sensitive than the other part of the brain that functions as the regulatory, part, or that, activate the regulatory mechanisms. So if you understand that, you know that they will go past that stage, right? And they will get to the stage where they will be able to make better decisions. But why they are not able to make better decisions at that stage, they are not meant to be stigmatized. They are not meant to be unduly punished. I said unduly punished deliberately because it can get to the level that we as parents may always want to punish them because of these immature behaviors that they put up. All we need to do is to understand them. We understand why they do what they do. And yes, why we help them, guide them, help them regulate those excessive emotional and rewarding behavior. We could also help them reinforce the ones that have positive consequences. Like I said earlier on, at a young age, we could encourage a child to start a club. We could encourage a child to take up responsibilities. In fact, I know, many of the advocacy that we do today, the most active element or actors are the students. They are the very young minds. They are so fearless. In fact, why you as an adult or you start weighing the consequences. Oh, these are the permissions that we should get. These are the things we should do. These are the bottlenecks we have. They have already said, let's start this. Don't worry, we break it when we get there. We cross the bridge when we get there. That can be a risky behavior, though, but it has positive consequences. So we can actually guide them through such and discourage the ones that have negative consequences. So at this moment, I would like to thank the moderator again for giving me the opportunity to go briefly through this, and I would like to hand the mic over to the moderator while we
Thank you
wait
very
for the other
much,
guest speaker.
convener Dr. Ayodeji Rubu.
Thank you very much. Can anybody hear the moderator?
Permit me to welcome our respect trainer. You are highly welcome to our room. So I welcome the participants. Up next, we'll be having the next topic for discussion, social media and substance use in young people. And we'll be having our experienced professional, Dr. Abegunde Oluwashayo. She's a senior registrar in the Department of Behavioral Sciences at the University of Ilorin Teaching Hospital. She is a passionate mental health advocate who actively leverages on various public platforms to speak on diverse mental health issues. She strives to ensure that quality mental health support is accessible to all who need it. With a warm welcome, we hand over the mic to Dr. Abegunde Shayo for the next section. Thank you. Dr. Abegunde, you have the mic. Okay, so that I don't keep us waiting why we try to get Dr. Abegunde on. I think we can just take the next topic. So the next topic will be taken by our experienced professional too. Gia for short is a clinical psychologist with more than 10 years in the health and tertiary education center in India, France, and United States. She specializes in the clinical psychology of the child and adolescent development from the University of Reims to France. As a former clinical psychologist in the Ministry of Health, she has been an advocate for the right to education of the inpatients and has played a significant role to bringing education to hospitalized children and adolescents. She was also a 2023 Mandela Washington Fellow of Bridgewater State University and a PDE Fellow of the City of Philadelphia Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. Anchored in her drive to provide support to the youth, she's currently working in the African Leadership College of Higher Education in Mauritius and supporting the holistic journey of students who aspire to become future African leaders. Gia, you have the mic. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you to the moderator for handing me the mic, and thank you for Dr. Adedeji for inviting me here. So today my topic is to talk about identity and parental and peer influence on the adults. For example, when we look at behaviors such as if I ask you to imagine banging of doors, refusal to follow rules, or even an eccentric sense of fashion, what would come to your mind is that it's adolescence, or as we call it, it's just a phase, it's the adolescence crisis. But then if we go beyond the crisis, as I will try to elucidate through my discussion today, is that it's not just a crisis, but it's also a hidden opportunity that we can make use of if we know how to tweak it, how to work with the adolescent. But for example, when we say adolescence, what is really adolescence? Psychologists would say that it is a dynamic phase of our lives that is marked by neurobiological, just like Dr. Ayudeji mentioned, the brain develops, and there is also cognitive and psychosocial development. And each adolescent with their brain, that has a higher reasoning capacity, the adolescent is now able to ask themselves questions that they were unable to ask when they were kids. For example, fundamental questions like, who am I? Or what do I believe in? Or whom do I want to become? Because as a child, they have childhood identification. For example, a child might tell you that I want to become a doctor, just like my mom, or I do not smoke because my dad doesn't. But an adolescent would start to question this. But what are really my interests? What makes me me? Or even if you smoke, my dad doesn't smoke, people do. It's not that bad. So why don't I smoke? So these are the questions that adolescents start to ask. And through those questions, they start to find meaning. And to find the meaning, they start to go through the phase of what we call an in-depth exploration. So they try to explore. And this becomes the turning point of the identity development. And a vast body of literature has shown that identity serves as a self-regulatory function and contributes in an individual's adaptation, well-being, sense of competence, and even motivational belief to master their study. Studies also revealed that adolescents who have a weaker sense of identity are at a higher risk of developing aggressive behavior, delinquent behavior, substance use, or even have a higher level of anxiety or depressive symptoms. So since identity is that important, for example, it impacts on the outcome, the life outcome of the individual. So how can we help? The good thing is that identity development is not something that just happens. It happens in the context of relationships, close relationships, such as family members and peers. So while adolescents are in that in-depth exploratory phase of their identity development, the presence of family and peers is crucial, as their interactions with the adolescent will help the adolescent get more feedback and adjust their identity. For example, if I ask you to imagine that an adolescent named Adi just went outside with his friends and is now showing pictures that he took to his parents. And the parents just say, your friend looks shady, just stay away from him. And this might make Eddie angry, and he might bang the door and lock his room and cry. And now imagine that later that day, the parents taunt him and tell him that, you're weak for crying. This feedback that the adolescent got will make him bottle up his emotions and even disconnect from the parents. But in the same situation, for example, Adi went out with his friends, came back, is showing pictures, and then the parents said something like, you should stay away from this friend. And Adi still went to his room and cried. If in this situation, the parent, however, act in a different way, for example, they wait for Adi to calm down, and for example, they ask Adi, what did I say that made you that angry? I was just worried, that this friend was not good for you because from what I saw, this opens up opportunity for communication and understanding. For example, in this communication, Adi might say, I know that my friend looks different, but when people are bullying me in class, he's the one there to stand up for me. So this opens up conversation. And also, it might also teach Adi to communicate. What did you feel in that situation? How did I make you feel when I said that thing? So this teaches Adi to work on his communication skill, to also work on conflict resolution. For example, if there's a conflict, you're angry about something, you calm down and then you come back and talk about it. It's not that you stay with that. And it also, helps him connect more with his parents. And it also helps the parent to understand him better. So the same situation, depending on how the parent deal with it, impacts on what feedback Adi is going to receive and how that is going to be integrated in his way of responding and in his identity. And we might also, take another example of peer influence. For example, if let's imagine there's a young adolescent called Amari, and he's praised by his peers every time he smokes or every time he partakes in a risk-taking behavior. So just to get the approval of his peers, he will have more tendency to do so. But on the contrary, if Amari's friend praises him whenever he does not give in to temptation and celebrates this will help Amari to improve his moral judgment and also help him develop more pro-social behavior and give in less to risky behavior. So in this, you can see that both family and peer interactions impact on the identity development of the adolescent, and both can be positive or negative, depending on how they support the adolescent. But however, research has shown that family plays a greater role as it is the first microsystem in which the individual develops. The family is always there throughout the different phases of the the individual's life. However, friends, they change. You may have different friends in kindergarten, different friends in primary, and different friends in secondary. So this family becomes that stable environment for the adolescent. So that's why it's very important. And research has also shown that, for example, for an adolescent to develop a stable identity, it is important that the parents have a stable identity and good interpersonal skills. So, for example, as adults, we can ask ourselves, how do we know if we have a stable identity or not? For example, let's just ask ourselves these questions. Ask yourself, who are you? Are you able to answer that question? What are my qualities? And why do I do the job that I do? For example, it might happen that for the last question, we might answer, well, obviously, I do the job that I do just to get money. An identity, a stable identity would reflect that I know the reason why I'm doing this job. There are thousands of jobs in the world, but what connects me with the job that I'm doing, even if I'm doing it for money? So this in-depth questioning exploration, if you're able to answer those questions by giving a meaningful individual answer, this shows that you have a stable identity. And for example, when you will have an adolescent in front of you who's asking questions like why, you'll be able to just give an answer that is not like, we do this just because it's done like this since ages. An adolescent will not buy that in. And this will not help the adolescent to work on his cognitive reasoning skills. So it's important that as adults around adolescent, if we work with adolescent, if we parent adolescent, that we ask ourselves that question. And we give ourselves that space to grow so that we can nurture the growth of adolescent. And another role that parents do in the identity development that becomes very difficult. For example, I in my clinical practice, I work with a lot of adolescents and parents. It's difficult because, for example, a few months ago, this child was your child. Now this child was just your son and a child. You treated them as a child and they were okay with it. And just after a few months, there's this drastic change. You now have in front of you an adolescent who's requesting for more space. And you're like, it's a child, I cannot give you more space. So the major role that is played by parents in adolescence is autonomy support. How to support the adolescent to become autonomous. This does not mean that you have to give them free will to do everything they want. They want to try this, you let them. They want to go out anytime, you let them. They want to try drugs, you let them. No. Autonomous support is being intentional and being flexible in your approach. To reallocate responsibilities, give more power in decisions, but gradually. This is a mistake that a lot of parents do. This gradual uh, reallocating of responsibilities and power is very important. Because if it's not done properly, the adolescent might feel at a loss or just abandoned. So it is very important to find the right balance of autonomy and control. And it is important to bear in mind that if you have 3 kids, if they become 3 adolescents, each one of them is going to be different. And the way you negotiate power and responsibility is going to be different. And that is why you need to be very present in the adolescent's life and present in their lives when they are kids. Because when they are kids, you're there to show that you're that safe, trustworthy person in their lives so that this connection is maintained despite the crisis, the difficult moments in adolescence. So the foundation of that trust is really made in childhood, and that is why you can better. That is how you can better support the identity development of your adolescent. And this might be is shown as a protective factor and, for example, risk taking behavior. So that is why I thought it was very important to talk about identity and how to support that, because identity development is correlated with um, outcomes in the future and decisions that adolescents are going to make. And it also impacts on their moral judgment. So that's why, as adults, we need to better support our adolescents to develop their identity and have a more stable identity so that they can say that I know why I'm doing this. And I have beliefs in which I have values and beliefs, and I know why. I'm not just blindly following around. So it becomes more stable and they are able to face the challenges in the society. So thank you for being here and listening to me. And I hope this was helpful. And I will hand the mic back to the moderator. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gia, for that interesting section. And we learned that as adults raising adolescents, teenagers, if we don't model having stable identities ourselves, it will be difficult to help them have identity. So up next, we'll be having the next section on social media and substance use in young people. I've introduced the guest speaker earlier on, and we'll just have Dr. Abigunde take over the mic. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for joining in very late. I was informed that I'd been called earlier. Sorry, I was on transit, so I could not meet up with the time. Uh, Once again, I'm Dr. Abegunde Oluwashayo, and I will be taking the topic about the role of social media, how it influences young people um, as regards taking substance. Um, as we know that in this our current time and the social media is something that um, we cannot take away from a young person or from an adolescent. Um, it's so intertwined into daily living that even um, going about their normal activities, such as even education. They would have to interact one way or the other with social media. And social media has its positive and negative effects on young people. And in as much as this is in relation to substance use, there are a lot of things going on in social media that we we really have to take time and discuss, especially as regards children or young people or adolescents. Um, the effects of social media, we can be quick to say there is nothing positive that can come out of interacting with social media or young people on social media, or they learn our negative vices and all that. But the truth is, in as much as these negative things are there, we cannot say they are not. There are a lot of things to gain positively too, as regards social media use and the use of substance in young people. Just a preamble, something I came across recently on social media that actually opened my eye, or let me say, gave me a depth or deepen my understanding about how social media these days can actually influence young people. I read a story of a boy, a 14-year-old boy that died by suicide just by interacting with AI. And the interaction was so real, and this boy believed so much that the AI gave this, it was called, the AI media was character AI. It was so real, and it influenced him to the extent that he decided to take his own life. So if interacting with social media can go as far as that, then we are talking of substance there. That means it has a lot to do with the way our young people um, take substance. And this is, I want to start first by highlighting those negative things that social media um, can do to adolescents as regards substance use. First thing here I want to talk about is normalization and glorification. The way social media has normalized, the use of substances is quite alarming. The way they glamorize alcohol, cigarettes, drug use, focusing on the fact that that is the only way you can have fun or you can bond socially with people. The negative consequences of this um, lifestyle is not really, being emphasized on social media. So we have influencers, you see them take substance, live the big life. And, adolescents, they learn by modeling, and, they pick it up from there and that. And they might begin to use substance. Another thing is peer influence and pressure. I remember when we were younger, once we leave school, we don't know what else is happening until we see our friends again the next day. But now that we have social media that young people interact with on daily basis, they can even continue discourse outside school where they are being monitored and all that. So, and this can go a long way in actually um, modeling and suggesting ways of taking substances. They can have discussions by themselves after school about types of substances, how they feel, and the pressure can begin to they can begin to feel pressurized to try it out. Also, social media is also a place where they are exposed to um, different marketing sources and different marketing strategies, targeted advertising, facilitated. They can order. There are dark webs where they can actually order for these substances on the internet. Through there are even systems now that normal chatting through WhatsApp, they can get contact of dealers, and from there, you know they get these substances and they begin to use them. So also, social media has a way of um of making things that are not real, real. So an adolescent through social media can begin to see these lifestyles as something that is real, like something that we have to, like something that is uh, achievable. So they begin to see drug use as common, as the norm, that that is accepted socially. Because of their interaction with social media, they are not able to balance what is obtainable on social media to what is obtainable culturally and morally. So they have a skewed view of the use of substance. Also, it impacts on the adolescent or the young person's mental health. So they begin to, compare themselves with others. The excessive use of social media and constant self-comparison to others can lead to things like anxiety, depression, low self-esteem. And these things are also risk factors to use of substance. Once they begin to struggle emotionally, they can turn to drugs or alcohol as a means of coping to manage their difficult feelings. Now, like I said, we there is a tendency to just assume that substances and social media um effect on young people and adolescents can just only be negatives, but there are also some positive things that can happen through the use of social media, influencing how a young person or an adolescent views, the use of drug. On social media, there are preventive and very educative things on social media. Health promotion, there are public health organizations, there are campaigns, there are culturally engaging relevant information on social media that they can engage to know the harmful effects of these substances. Social media can also be used to showcase the positive majority, that is the large number of people that are not using substances and they are doing very well. On social media too, they can come in contact with such an individual, and this helps that common to correct that common misconception that substance use is something that is universal. Also on social media, they can actually access help. um there are resources for substance abuse treatment, helplines, mental health support. Like what we are even doing now is something that is also helpful in that regard. Also, community and connection. Teens or adolescents that are struggling with substance use or mental health issues can find correct and supportive online communities, that they will not feel isolated, they will not feel judged, and can help them in choosing a better lifestyle, or that can help shape their perception about drug use. Also, they can build their skills on social media too. So this will involve parents and educators. They can use the presence of pro substance content on social media as a teaching tool to help adolescents develop critical evaluation skills. They can teach them to question the motives behind the content they see and recognize the glamorization and manipulation tactics that social media can use to entice them um, into substance use. The influence of social media is ultimately shaped by what a teen sees and does online. The amount of time spent on social media online and their pre-existing psychological um, vulnerabilities. So for a teen, there are a lot of things that will determine if this social media exposure would eventually be a risk factor to the teenager or to the adolescent tilting towards substance use. So things like what content, what are the things that the teenager is exposed to, and this is where guidance and parental control comes in. Then what this teenager, what does he do online? That means monitoring has a lot to do in these regards. And the amount of time spent on social media, this is something that we really have to look into. Even let's not even talk of teenagers now, as young as 8 months, 1 year old children, we already introduce them to social media, and over time they might become addicted and begin to spend a lot of time on social media, and this can actually influence what type of content they would see. Also, pre-existing psychological vulnerabilities like a disturbed adolescents using social media to cope might begin to uh, have exposure to to people that have such issues, and they are beginning to use substance to cope. In summary, or in conclusion rather, social media use for adolescent as regards, or the influence of social media on an adolescent as regards it being a risk factor for substance use, depends on a lot of factors. And uh, and also um, we can we can actually help or tune the use of their social media in such a way that it would help prevent their exposure, or them having the risk to lean towards substance use. Thank you so much for having me and listening.
Thank you, Dr. Abegunde, for the presentation. We learned that we can't stop our adolescents from using social media because it's not all totally bad. However, um, the influence it will have on them is shaped by what they see, do, and some pre-existing vulnerabilities, which we as parents have a big role to play. Up next, we'll be having our question and answers. We have some questions that were sent in by those who registered, and we'll be starting with that. But if you also have questions here, you can drop them on the chat box. So, Dr. Abegunde, please, you'll be helping us to answer the first question. Is a 3-in-1 question. So you can just help us pen it down and give a summarized answer. So this person wants to know the reasons why advice from friends have more impact than the parents. Also, that why do teenagers take so much risk, especially the girls? And the third part to that 3-in-1 question is that how can parents guide their children through their youth without them stepping out of morality. So you can just help us give a summarized answer on the 3-in-1 question. Thank you. You can drop our questions on the chat box so that we can harvest them.
Thank you so much for that question. Um, the first is, why do young people take advice from their friends? They take it seriously, and I think to answer that question, we have to look at the fact that the first exposure of a child to the world is through the family. The family should model what the world looks like to the child, to the growing child. And in most cases, what happens is that this model, this what this family is supposed to model is not complete. We focus on some things and we neglect some other areas, so that this child is getting this child is seeing this family or this parents as people that he or she cannot really interact with. So the child is growing to understand that there are some things that I cannot express to my parents, because they've not modeled what the world is in holistically to that child. So they are curious. A young child is curious. They are growing. They want to know, they want to explore, and they are free with their peers. And when their peers give them answers to these questions that they have, there is no place where this young child, or where these young adults can actually go to confirm and be sure. So it's like they tend to just take whatever their peers say as the truth and as the only answer. So in order to work on this, communication is very important. Let's be open with these growing adults, so that they are free to get the correct information from the house, from the home rather. Then teenagers, why do the teenagers take risk, especially the girls? Well, generally, for somebody that is growing, or a child, when a child is born, there is the aspect that regulates rational decisions. We call it the prefrontal cortex lobe. That area is not fully developed until the child is probably maybe around 21. So what we are saying is that they make these decisions in such a way that they are not really holistic, or they are not very rational about the decisions that they take, because this frontal lobe is not yet fully developed. So they tend to just take decisions without thinking of the consequences, and they take a lot of risk because of that. Then how can parents guide their children through their youth without them stepping without them getting involved with immorality? For young people, again, I've worked with some of them, and I realized that communication is very, very important. Giving them the right information. I can say this even about my own biological children. I've discovered that once you strive to give them that correct information from home, then they use that to stand against whatever information is coming from outside, and they can have that confidence to come back to you and actually tell you the other counter information, because they are very, very inquisitive. They want to know, so they will keep asking. So once that line of communication is open, it will be very easy for you to guide these young people, and to help them that in such a way that they will not tend towards being immoral, because whatever it is, they can come home and they can actually talk to you about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those responses. So the next set of
Sorry,
questions goes to,
can I bump
all
in? I
right,
actually
the
read
convener wants to add
unmuted.
something.
Thank
Yes,
you
I
very much.
you
The
can.
first question is so interesting that an example just came into my mind. So before that, I want to thank Dr. Ladeji is in the house, consultant psychiatrist, Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Budega. Thank you so much. It's actually my teacher. Thank you so much for coming to join us. God bless you. So, Dr. Adegunde, just to buttress what you said earlier on, an example came to my mind. For a young child that tends to agree easily with their colleagues and friends than their parents who are supposed to be guiding them. It's so funny because we experience this every time. Remember what I said earlier on? The child or the adolescent and the friends, they think in a certain way, right? The mother, the father, the elder siblings, they also think in a different way, just because they are different stage of their emotional and cognitive maturation, like I said earlier on. One group tend to, lean towards things that are rewarding, things that are risky, things that will just gratify. The other group tends to lean towards things that are critical, that are logical, that are fully analyzed before they take action. So this is the fundamental reason why it seems one would, by default, want to feel that, okay, my friend is actually correct. Let me give an example. A young child, a young girl, age of 14 or 13, start to like a boy in school and is caught in between telling the parent or the friend. This is the hypothetical situation. If this young girl feels like, I like this boy, but I feel, should I talk to this boy or not? Should I give in to align my emotions and start having romantic relationship with this boy? Remember, I said 14 years of age. This girl, if she talks to, or this boy, if he or she talks to a colleague, somebody of the same age range, guess what the response will be? Most likely, this person will say, do you like him? Do you love him? Oh, he's cute too. I think you should talk to him. I think you should do this and do that. These are the natural things that will come to the mind of such person. If I was at that age, so this is the way I would think because it is the way my brain is designed. For the parents, if this guy goes to the parents, what are the possible responses? Before the parent says anything, the parents would have thought of many things. Is it culturally acceptable for you, a young girl, to approach a guy that you love him? Okay, you're 14 and you're talking about romance. Okay, you're 14. Are you done with school? Are you that? Are you this? They would have raised, 101 questions, logical questions that would just make the girl to feel like, oh my God, this mother is not going to help me. Let me go to the person that would gratify my feeling, that would validate my feeling and encourage me to do what truly my emotion wants. So I feel that example has just buttressed, the point that we are trying to raise, answering this question. Thank you so much for allowing me to raise this example.
Thank you so much, sir, for the addition. So, Gia will be helping us with this two-in-one question. How can someone who is trying to break free from addictions, especially substance abuse, substance addiction, how can that person do that? And then the second one is, how can we eradicate the use of substance among teenagers? Thank you, Gia.
Thank you for the questions. Actually, how can someone break free from addiction? It's very difficult to break free from addiction without treatment. So it is advised to go for treatment. Um, I don't know how it is in different countries. It's different. For example, in Mauritius, what happens is that if somebody wants to get over an addiction, they seek help because addiction is not something. It's not just the behavior. The addiction changes the neurological patterns. of the brain. It impacts on the brain. It changes how the brain is. So that person needs treatment. And that is why now addiction is recognized as substance use disorder. It is a mental disorder that needs help. So they need to ask help, mainly from a psychiatrist who's going to assess the severity of the addiction, and also have sessions with psychologists who's going to help work on the different difficulties that the person might have, because often addiction or substance use disorder does not come by itself alone. It usually hides other mental health issues that need to be diagnosed and treated. So that is why if they want to break free from addiction, it is very important that they seek help. And it is okay if they have relapses, because that is part of addiction. Addiction or substance use disorder is more seen as a chronic disease instead of something that can be cured, that is acute. It is more chronic, so they really need help. And the second question that says how to eradicate use of substance in teenagers. This is a crisis in all countries. And Mauritius, it is a huge crisis, and it is flagrant, it is rampant, it is everywhere. Even kids know how to make drugs. They are making synthetic drugs in school, and it becomes very difficult. For example, one person cannot eradicate the use of substance by themselves. There need to be actual policies that is going to enforce the actions of ministries and even NGOs. Everybody has to work together to be able to combat, because like the US said, there is the war on drugs, and now it's almost everywhere. It's like there needs to be a collaborate effort to really fight against that, because a single institution cannot fight against drugs. There needs to be sensitization in school, well, proper treatment available, trained professional in the hospital, general awareness in the public. So all of this needs really a concerted effort amongst all stakeholders. So that is really huge work to be done on this topic. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you for the responses. And so the next set of questions go to our convener, Dr. Erubu. Before I read out the questions, I don't know if my teacher, Maemebu Chief Reg, is still on. Dr. Dolapo Oladiji, you're welcome, sir, and every other participant who joined after I welcomed the participants. So, Dr. Erubu, please, you help us answer these 2-in-1 questions. What is the link between depression and mental health, and how do I overcome anxiety? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for this question. So the person asking this, okay, whether the person is in the house or not, this will be recorded also. Depression, I'll start by saying what depression is. Depression is a mental disorder, which is under the emotional disorders that we have. It is characterized by undue low mood, reduced energy, feelings of loss of motivation or interest in activities that used to be quite interesting to the person, feeling of negative thoughts of negativity, feeling of worthlessness, feeling of hopelessness, feeling of, they describe it as this gloomy feeling in which what the person sees every time is darkness and no light. So such an individual is just boxed inside such a gloomy, confines, or such gloomy confines. So other symptoms of depression may include suicidal ideations, ideas of self-harm, suicidal attempts. The person can also, depending on severity, would also have some very severe symptoms, like symptoms that make them lose touch with reality are the most severe forms of depression. And there are diagnostic criteria before we could say somebody has clinical depression. In the general setting, people use depression, to describe whenever they are sad. However, sadness can be a normal phenomenon when there is a stimulus that makes me feel, bad, that makes me feel down. I feel sad. That is normal. However, this should not last for long. By the time it becomes pervasive, becomes prolonged, starts to affect my functioning, we're already thinking of a clinical depression. So different diagnostic criteria may use different names like depressive episodes, major depressive disorder, and so on and so forth. Another thing to add is that for you to see somebody has clinical depression, it has to affect the functioning in the context of personal functioning, occupational functioning, functioning in broader social context, and within the family context. These four domains should actually be affected before you say something is a symptoms that is, or are symptoms that are, that are damaging. That is these 5Ds that they also put into consideration when making diagnosis of depression. In relationship to mental health, I said earlier on that it is a mental disorder. Okay, but when we talk about mental health, it's the overall umbrella, the concept that describes our well-being as an individual. So according to WHO, mental health is a state of well-being. Let's understand that it is a state of well-being. It is a state of being in certain position or certain, spatial confinement, where an individual realizes their potential, they can cope with day-to-day stresses of life, they can work productively and fruitfully, and can contribute positively to the immediate community. From this definition, we can all see that mental health is all about our well-being, our functioning, our joy, our happiness, how we do at work, my relationship with people around me, with my family members, my contribution, my work, different things that show that I am functioning. That is mental health. We didn't hear anything like depression in mental health. We didn't hear anything like anxiety in mental health. But we start to have disorders when we start having mental health symptoms that affect our mental health or well-being, and they start to affect us and affect our function. That is when we have disorders. And an example of a disorder is depressive disorder that I said earlier. The second question, how to cope with anxiety, I would like to be brief about that because it's actually a big one. Anxiety, just like depression, can actually be a normal response to maybe an anxiety provoking stimulus. If, as we're having this meeting now, I hear a large sound, it is natural for me to panic momentarily, or to skip, or to fidget just within a few seconds, or at most minutes. However, if this becomes persistent and pervasive, it is moving away from normal anxiety to a pathologic anxiety. So that becomes an anxiety symptom. Or even without any stimulus, I start having fears. I start to become anxious. I start to worry too much. I start panicking. I start having palpitation, sweating, tremors, fidgeting, the feeling of always being on the edge. These are symptoms of anxiety, and we can see that it is moving towards being a normal phenomenon to being a phenomenon that is looking like a disorder. Like depression, we also have criteria to diagnose anxiety. So when somebody is having undue anxiety, undue worries, that is moving away from normal, there are different things to do. Number one, which is the most important thing, is to seek help. Seek help, see a professional who is going to start a management plan that will be tailored towards you. Just said earlier on about collaborative treatment and management. In anxiety disorder, also there is collaborative management. There is the possibility of the person being given medication, possibility of psychotherapy, which is the psychological treatment. There is the possibility of social treatment, modifying the social environment to suit or relieve anxiety in such an individual. Where are the stressors? Remove the stressor. That is social treatment. Also, there are possibilities, or there is a possibility of teaching this person behavioral, techniques, which will fall under behavioral therapy. So there are different therapies. These techniques can help the person relieve anxiety, and you will get to learn about this management plan when you see a professional. At home, if you're prone to being anxious, you can routinely, do a deep breathing exercise, ensure that you relax more. You know, we face stresses every time, okay? Ensure that you relax. Sleep is important. Prioritize your sleep. Ensure that as an adult, you take minimum of 6 to 8 hours of sleep every night. It is very crucial. As a student studying at night, if you ever read in the night, please take afternoon nap. Have a timetable that encourages sleep. Don't go without sleep every time, because at the time of writing the exam, the brain will eventually shut down, and anxiety plays role when the brain is shutting down during this phase for a student. So I think I will just pass the mic at this point to the moderator.
Thank you, sir, for the response. So we go to the next question, and Jia, you'll be helping us with this. It says that the parenting style we know are not currently anymore. What can be done? And the second part to that question is a two-in-one question. What are the things parents must know to be an effective parent? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Actually, for the first one, when they say, that the parents that we know are not there anymore, I would also say that the context in which we live is not the same anymore. The society in which we lived when we were kids is very different from the society in which our children are living. And that is why we cannot be the same parents as our parents were, because the context is very different. So that is why there is this difference. And the second is what parents can do. Well, offer support, develop self awareness about themselves, and accompany the children with support as much as the children need. So there is the need to really understand the child, take that moment to understand the child. Because a lot of parents are so caught up in work and life that they don't take time for children. And children do not need materialist things. They need the presence of parents, the presence that helps them develop their communication skills, the presence that helps them understand themselves and explore in depth. Because, for example, I will take uh, this particular patient that is coming to my mind. So, this was a patient who was hospitalized for substance use disorder. And I met with the father, who was a very well known professional, who was devastated. And this particular father came in very sad and was showing me his phone. He was like, I do everything for my kid. I work morning till 9 in the night. I use a broken phone. He showed me his broken Nokia phone held with an elastic band. And he was saying that I do this just for my kid, to have all the comfort in his life. My child has the latest iPhone, he has his own car, but I don't know how he turned up like this. So I feel that parents really need to develop that emotional sensitivity to understand really what do their children need, because that particular patient has really marked me, because um, he had a lot of risk-taking behaviors, rash driving, drinking and driving, promiscuous behavior, substance use, trying of all substances. But then when I meet this child in therapy and I ask him, why do you do all that? How do you feel? He's like, I have a lot of anger. I'm very angry towards my dad because he never paid any attention to. So I feel there is this balance that parents need to bring in their own life to balance work, family. And another thing that is very crucial, parents need to work in tandem together. Both the mother and the father have to work together. Otherwise, the child will feel lost if there is not a uniform way of upbringing the child. And even if, because, for example, in Mauritius, divorce is very common, there's a lot of divorces, but parents need to realize that they took the responsibility of bringing a child in this world. And even if the relationship is not working, their role as a parent has to continue. And they have to make sure that they do everything for the benefit of the child. Because what we see in reality is that parents are using their child just to manipulate the other person, the other partner. So parents need to take that responsibility seriously, and they need to work together to really support their children. So that is all I can say for this question.
Thank you so much. That's actually a lot. Dr. Abegunde will be helping us with this two-in-one question. He says this generation has an unlimited access to the media. How can this be reduced or channeled into an effective aspect of their lives rather than the social and pleasurable part of it? So I know that's long. Let me take it again. This generation has an unlimited access to the media. How can this be reduced or channeled into an effective aspect of their life than the social and pleasurable part of it? The second question is, children now have access to media than concrete things that could help their growth. I think is affecting their growth or identity. Is there any solution to that? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for moderating this session. To answer the first question about how social media can be channeled to, I just want to paraphrase the question. I think what the person is trying to ask is that how can we manage social media in such a way that it impacts children positively? I think one thing we can do is to monitor what they do on social media. We should not be lazy to actually take the time to see what they are doing on social media. We should not be carried away with our peace. They are in their room doing their thing. I have this time to myself. We should take effort and time to see what they are doing on social media. We can also direct them. There are a lot of things that they can learn on social media. They can learn in languages. There are apps. They can learn about skills. They can learn a lot of things on social media. So um, we can actually help them so in such a way that they focus on those positive skills. So for example, I'm going to use what I do for my children. Um, during school period, they don't have access to anything fun, or let me say what would term fun on social media. So I direct what they learn. They have Duolingo app, they have apps for learning music, they have apps for learning culture. So I make sure maybe their screen time during school hour is 1 hour. That's another thing. Effectively limiting their screen time is something we also have to work on. It might be difficult in the beginning, but as a parent, you have to be firm and you have to constantly explain the reason why you are doing that, so that they don't see it as a form of punishment for the child. So they know that, okay, once school is in section, I don't do anything screen. And if I would do something screen, it must be something very meaningful. So 1 hour screen time. So it's either you go to your Duolingo app or your music app, and like that, the amount of time they spend is limited. And even if they are spending that time, they are using it for the positive side of social media. And we should also understand that they are very curious. They want to learn. They want to explore. So we should also put that in mind. And in this era where a lot of information are there on social media, I think constant education at home too is important, so that the child knows, okay, this is my limit, this is my boundary, this is what I can do, and all that. Sorry, I've forgotten the second question.
Okay, so the second question, you've answered it partly, but let me still mention it. It says, this generation has an unlimited access to the media. How can this be reduced? Oh, sorry. The second one is, that's the first one. Children now have access to media than concrete things that will help their growth. I think it's affecting their growth or identity. Is there any solution to that? Which I think you have mentioned different things, but if you still have other things to add, you can add more.
Okay, thank you. So I just to that to add to answer that question is the fact that children, especially adolescents, can really get carried away, and they can, especially in this era of AI, they can, like the story I shared earlier, they can actually not interact with the world and not really have a balanced view of what the world is all about. I think in tackling that, I've mentioned earlier, is to actually limit their screen time and educate them on things and the repercussion. That's another thing, because when you're educating a child, it's not just about the repercussion. They might become rebellious in that sense. So you teach them that, okay, this is what you can benefit if you do this, this is the repercussion, this is the outcome. So in that way, they are able to also by themselves regulate social media um, in terms of just concentrating on the positive aspect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the response. We are gradually moving towards the end of this program, and the last question will be answered by our convener. He says, my thoughts, though, I think due to evolution or the involvement of human, we, this generation, do take some risk or very risky behavior or step with the consciousness of the consequences. So the person is asking, is this true or is there another explanation to it? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for this. So it's just to either validate this person's, view or not. Well, I like the fact that the person said that with the knowledge of the consequences. For now, my own question would be, is there a true knowledge of the consequences actually? We said earlier on, we said the reason why they would prioritize taking such actions as against having to really think about it, as against having to weigh the consequences. Because the part that will weigh the consequences is not well developed. So what's going to weigh the consequences? And this is where they need, a more mature mind to come in, or a parent or someone to guide to come in and advise. It's a bit unfortunate, or it's a bit, how do I put it, unattractive now, because many of young ones, especially almost everyone, even when we're young, we saw our parents' advices as unattractive. We saw them as old school, as, oh, they do not understand what we go through. The truth is, they do not usually understand. But at the same time, what their own direction, their advices are actually golden. They're actually the way to help us regulate such, some of these very risky behaviors. But because we do not know that, we cannot internalize that, because we don't even have what it takes to understand that. So we would think, oh, they are also, they don't understand us. So what I think is that this person's awareness of the consequences is very limited. it may not be a true awareness of the consequences. If they know, they may not really know the extent of the damages. So long there is no dependency syndrome, like we say, where, despite complete awareness, knowledge, and evidences that this thing is damaging, you keep doing it. So long there is no addiction or dependence, somebody that will actually take a very risky, decision that would result in negative consequences, I believe do not have an in-depth, knowledge of to what extent would this thing damage me. I wouldn't say they do in most cases. If they do, the rate at which they would make such decisions will be reduced. And this is where we have people that are more mature to lead us, to correct us, to sometimes tell us that, okay, this thing we are doing too much. Can you cut down on this? Can you cut down on your screen time? Can you cut down on on your habits, eating habits, lifestyle? The fact that you're doing this, you are doing that, I think it, on the long run, our parents used to say something that what an elder has already seen while seated, a child will not see even if they climb the ladder to the highest part. This is actually a depiction of what we're talking about, because one, they've been through it. Two, that prefrontal cortex of their brain is fully developed to completely understand the consequences of negative decision making or risky negative decisions. So I don't know if that is enough to shed
Thank
light on this.
Thank you very much, sir. It's quite enough. And so, if you have been with me on this program, you would agree that it's been a very interesting time. We have been enlightened, we have been educated, we have been informed. And I know your time has really been worth it. And as we bring this November edition to a close, I want to appreciate the convener of ICED, Dr. Ayodeji Erubu, for putting this together. It's a big project, and we really value what you do. I want to appreciate our guest speakers, Dr. Abegunde Oluwashayo from University of Ilorin Teaching Hospital, and Gia, our clinical psychologist, all the way from Mauritius. Thank you so much for doing big justice to the topics. I want to appreciate my colleagues, senior colleagues, every highly esteemed participant who took out time to attend this program. And finally, I want to thank myself, who has been the moderator on this program. I am Adeoye Titilayo. I'm a consultant psychiatrist, lecturer, and a mental health content creator. My handles are Dr. underscore Ayadeoye. I am on IG and on YouTube channel. Have a lovely evening. Thank you so much, everyone, once again.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.